It's hard to think the unthinkable, but there comes a time when there's nothing else for it. People raised to trust the powers that be, who have assumed, like I once did, that the state, regardless of its political flavour at any given moment, is essentially benevolent and well-meaning, will naturally try and keep that assumption of benevolence in mind when trying to make sense of what's going on around them. People like us, you and me, raised in the understanding that we are free, that we have inalienable rights, and that the institutions of this country have our best interests at heart, will tend to tie ourselves in knots rather than contemplate the idea those authorities might actually be working against us now. I took that thought of benevolent, well-meaning authority for granted for most of my life. God help me. Not to put too fine a point on it, I was as gullible as the next chump. A couple of years ago, however, I began to think the unthinkable.
I'm not going to play the whole thing.
Passing day, it becomes more and more obvious to me that we are no longer being treated as individuals entitled to try and make the most of our lives, but as a barn full of battery hens, just another product to be bought and sold down the river.
That's why I wanted to stop it. People, I'm going to get the link for this. Everybody has to go listen to this. And you watching this now, let me just tilt this down a little bit. I want it perfect so I can see the freedom right up there. You, everyone who's on Twitter or even not, share it. It's 9.5 minutes. The most eloquent, insightful analysis you'll ever hear. I described it as intellectual art, and I'm an idiot because I know poetry is a form of art, but I meant intellectual poetry. The prose, the pace, it's mesmerizing just in its delivery. I mean, in a way, it could just be, what's it called when you have that, the random lettering on websites? There's a word for the random. It could just be reading the phone book. The pace, the tone would be mesmerizing. But the insight, Neil Oliver, I only discovered him in lockdown. So I don't know who Neil Oliver was before or what he was. I don't know if Neil Oliver was like me 4 years ago, wanting nothing more than just to laugh, to take life like a wonderful game. I don't know if Neil Oliver was like me 20 years ago when the war in Iraq. I was listening to Neil Oliver through this, and I'm thinking, holy crab apples. He's describing me in a very meaningful sense. I remember the way I thought back in the second Iraq war. They wouldn't make stuff up. They wouldn't lie about weapons of mass destruction. Why would they do that? Why would they risk innocent lives over some? I remember thinking like that. And you know, I look at Neil Oliver, not knowing what he looked like 3 years ago or 2+ years ago. I don't know if he was clean shaven, short haired like me, you know, wide eyed, naive, looking at the world like, you know, the government is there to take care of us and you should trust the government. I don't know if he looked like me 3 years ago. And now we're sort of going down the same psychological, intellectual, political journey of discovery and realization that it's not just like this now, it has always been like this. But in the second Iraq war, and they said WMDs, and they came out with their 7 agencies, MI6, CIA, FBI, they all came out and they said, Iraq has WMDs, we have to go and invade. Shock and awe, broadcasting war, primetime news. I remember it happening. And I remember thinking, oh, well, yeah, look at that. It's yay. Go, America, go. I'm not criticizing Americans here. I'm criticizing the Bush regime at this point in time and the media machine. Let's televise primetime destruction of a nation, annihilation of civilians, blowing up home. All right, let's celebrate it. It's for the entertainment of the West. And I remember thinking, it's got to be for a good reason. They wouldn't do this just for money. They wouldn't do this just for strategic interests. I remember having faith in a government system. And then they didn't find the weapons of mass destruction. And they kept on looking harder and harder. Oh, he must have moved them. He went from one palace to the next. Oh, they won't give him access to a palace. That's because he's hiding weapons of mass destruction in the basement. The way Trump is hiding nuclear documents in Mar-a-Lago. And then they didn't find them. Oh, we didn't find them, but we found Scud missiles because in the first weeks of the war, Iraq was launching Scud missiles at Israel, and that was the fallback moving of the goalpost argument, except I didn't even realize it was moving of the goalpost argument back then. Back then, I ran with that argument because I was blind, naive, and I'll say stupid. Not stupid in the brain fire. He's just stupid in that I didn't even know what I didn't know. Hey, Winston, don't do that. You son of a gun. He's eating one of the sound panels. I didn't even know what I didn't know. I didn't appreciate what a moving target of an argument was. So, they didn't find sarin. They didn't find nuclear. They didn't find weapons of mass destruction, but they shot Scud missiles, and he wasn't supposed to have those under the treaty. So 250,000 Iraqi civilians dead, justified because he had Scud missiles. And now we know what we know. Neil Oliver is amazing. I've been watching him throughout COVID. Amazing. Insightful. Share it.